Hello folks, Matt Peterson here, trainer at Pragmatic Works, and welcome to the next episode in our Building an App in Microsoft Teams series. So in this episode, what we're going to do is continue where we left off, and we're going to add in a form so that we can start collecting data. Now, if you haven't watched the other videos, that's okay. You can watch this one just to see how forms are put into Canvas applications inside of Teams to collect data. But if you want to build an end-to-end check-in, check-out application, take a look in the description below and you can see all the future videos to get to where we're at in this point. So without any further ado, let's head on over and take a look at how to put forms inside of our Canvas applications. Alright, so we're over here in Power Apps, and I'm going to click on Build to choose the team that I want to do this in, which is my YouTube app and team series. And then we're going to go to See All so that we can go inside and see our solution. I have a lot more in here because I do a lot of testing in here, but where you should have, if you've been following along with me, in your apps section, you should have your student check-in app, and that's the one that we're going to select and start to go into and edit. And what we want to do in this video is show how to add in a form to start collecting data, and for this case is check-in and check-out records. So we're not going to get into everything that forms can do because there's a lot, and so we're going to break this up into a few different videos throughout building this app. But we're going to start with the basics to get us started with here today. So what we want to do is we want to add in a form. So on this screen, we're going to come up here to the Insert ribbon, and we're just going to search for an Edit Form. Now you might be saying, Matt, that doesn't make sense. You were trying to make a new record. Why would you be putting in an edit form? Have no fear. We're going to talk about that in just a few moments. So I'm going to make this form, make it pretty big over here. I'm going to change my background color to white so it shows nicer. And now what I need to do is connect this form to data. So over here in my data source dropdown, I'll hit the dropdown. But right now I don't have my check-in table currently hooked into this application because we haven't done that yet. So in order to do that, let's head on over here to our data hub and let's click on Add Data and let's look for our student check-ins and checkouts. And so we're going to add this table in that we created in a prior video. So once that's in, now I can come to the data source dropdown and bring in our student check-in and checkouts. Now when you do this, by default, if you're using Dataverse, it starts to bring in columns that they think you want to use in your form. However, you might not want to use all the columns they bring in, or maybe you want to bring in some other columns that it didn't find for you. These are typically like your lookup columns. So let's make those modifications here. So now that we have these fields currently in, notice we can do a few things before I add more fields in here. I can come over instead of saying, instead of being at columns 3, I want to show it in a 2-column form here. And instead of a vertical, if I want horizontal, you see that the identifiers of the fields go in front. But I kind of like it being vertical here. Again, design it however you want to. But most importantly is I want to change the fields that are currently in. So to add fields or remove, we come over here to Edit Fields. Checkout date and time, don't need it. We're going to use that later after the student leaves us. That's not part of the initial check-in. So to remove this field, I'm going to hit the 3 dots and then simply hit Remove. All right. Now the check-in identifier. This was our primary name column. If you can remember from our videos a while back, our primary name column on this table was set to be auto-numbered. So therefore, my users aren't going to be doing anything with this. So I can choose to just remove it from the form, or maybe I want them to, when they come back to the record down the road, I want them to reference that actual value that's here. So we have a few ways to handle this. I'm going to handle it in one scenario. What I want to do for this check-in identifier is if I hit the drop-down, notice it's currently set to view text, which is exactly what I want. Because if it was edit text, that means the user puts in their own check-in identifier. I want this to be a view text, which means it's going to show in the form, but my users aren't going to be able to type anything into it. So Power Apps handle this perfectly for me. Now in terms of other fields, every field you bring in has different control types based on the data type. So the teacher is edit text, but notice I could make it an edit multi-line text. When I change that, that gives them a bigger block of code to look at as they are typing in their information. For us, edit text really makes the most amount of sense. So we have our comments, we have our check-in date and time. So let's add in, we need 2 more additional fields here. One, we need to know the location that we're checking the child into, and we need to know what student we're doing this with. So you can see that these were both lookup columns and it didn't bring those in. So we're going to bring in the student and the location. Now at this point, we might not like the layout of our fields inside of the form. So maybe I don't want the comments to be second, but I want the comments to be the last thing. So if I just drag and drop, I can drag my comments now down to the bottom. And then maybe I want the student to be after the teacher, or whatever the case might be. All you have to do is you just drag and you drop things how you want them. So I kind of like the way this field form looks. We're not going to get it picture perfect to save time on the video. So now that we have this set, let's move into the next piece of the puzzle. When I hit play, it's not going to work. It says no item to display. And the reason it says no item to display is we put in an edit form. Edit form's job is to take a record and start to edit it. Well, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a brand new record, but there isn't a new form option. So how do we change this to say, hey, I want to make a new record and not edit a record? It's a really easy fix, but it's something I always forgot to do when I first started doing apps. I kept getting that no item to display, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to make that easy change. So here's the easy change that we're going to make. So I'm going to close out of my preview here, and I'm going to click on my form, and then over on the right, I'm going to change the default mode from edit, and I'm going to switch it over to new. So now if I hit play, now we're in business. So I can choose the dates, the times, I can put in the teacher's name, I can go and find the location, I can find the student. Oh, not happy with that. So this is bringing in the student primary name column, which we call the student identifier. I would really like to bring in the information about the student, like maybe their first name here. So how can we fix this? Well, not too difficult. So I'm going to close out a preview. And what we want to do is I'm going to get my tree view back active here. Every form has data cards in it of the fields that you have brought in. And every data card has different properties that we can manipulate. Some of these properties you can manipulate right away, but most of them you have to unlock your data card before you can change. And this is especially true with like our defaults. So if I come over here to student, notice right now it's currently locked. If I hit the edit icon next to field, notice I can't do anything other than change the control type. But the minute I come over here and I right click on it and I hit unlock, now I'm going to be able to start manipulating some things. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to go into the data card value of the student. And then in the properties pane, we have these fields and we have edit. So if I click edit next to this field data card value, I can change the primary text that shows up in here. By default, it chooses the primary name column on that table you're looking up to, which I don't think really makes sense here. So I want my users to be able to see the first name. Now I can change the search field here as well if I want my users to search, but in the end, I'm going to make it to where they don't have to search. All right, so I'm going to leave that as is for now. So just change that primary text to first name. So I'm going to close out of here. Now if I go back to play, now I should be able to see in a few moments when I start making new records, I'll be able to see the students' first names here. But we don't have that yet, and that's okay. Because here's why I need to make a little, not a correction, but I'm going to make this easier for my users. What I want to do is I'm going to come over here and we can see that the items for this drop down here is set to all the choices for the student column that looks up to the student table. So because I only have 3, in a few moments we'll only see 3 different choices to choose from. Well, I want to default this to who they have selected on their gallery. So I'm going to copy out all the items for this dropdown, and in that data card value, I'm going to come up to the default selected items. And what I want to do is I want to paste in, so I have all of these choices for my users to choose from. However, I'm going to filter this down to make things easy. So I'm going to say take all these choices and let's filter them. So how does the filtering need to work? So I do a comma, and I say, okay, currently on my check-in table, there is a student column. So I'm going to say, I want to take a look at the student column. And I want the student to equal the student that I have over in the lookup table. And I can reference those lookup records in this gallery because they're the ones that have the student table. So I'm going to say gal browse students dot, so look at that control. Look at who I have selected in that control, so bring back that record. And now what is the record identifier for there, our primary column that's looking up, which in this case it is our student. So I'm going to choose student, which is the unique identifier, because every time you make a table, it makes a column with the same name as the table as the identifier. So I'm going to close that off. And notice the minute I did that, now we see Jack right away because I have Jack selected. Well, is it working? Well, if I hit play, I go, here we go, Layla, I'm on 4, Jack, and if I hit this drop down, now I can choose any of the ones that I want to use. So we're getting there. But how does my user know that they've got 4 Jack or Layla selected? Well, they can see it in the form, but let's make this a little bit more UI friendly. So I'm going to close out of here. We're going to head back to the gallery for a second. And what I want to do is on this gallery, if a record is selected, I want the color to look different inside of that cell. So where that's going to be located is up in the drop down, we have a property called the template fill property, which is currently set to clear, which is why all of the color of the gallery is coming through. Well, let's add some conditional logic in here. So I'm going to say if this item, that's how we refer to a record in a gallery, if the record is selected, comma, what color do I want to use? Well, I'm going to use the header color, but I'm going to color fade it so that way they kind of match up here. So I'm going to use a color fade formula. So I'm going to say color fade, so color fade, and I'm going to go to my variable, which for my background color of the header, it's primary. So I'm going to go var primary, comma, how much do I want to fade it by? Let's fade it by like 75%. And let's see how that looks. So, and I close that off that color fade. I kind of like that. It looks pretty good. So now if I hit play, now we start seeing the names are changing and the colors are changing here for us. Great, things are looking good. But let's add some more default actions in here. So let's go to the teacher, for example. So for the teacher, we just set this up as a regular text field. So let's get the teacher's name inside of this text field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock this data card again. I'm going to go into its data card value, and instead of my user typing in their name, let's go with something like the following. We can use the user function. So we'll go user, open parentheses, close parentheses, dot, and I want their full name. So I'll put full name, and so now I see that the teacher is Matt Peterson. So whoever's logged in, it's going to bring in their full name. And notice the user function can also bring in their image as well as their email address. So far things are looking good. Now, with the teacher though, if I hit play, notice I can come in here and change this around if I want to. I could put someone else's name. So maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe what I want is that whoever is using the app, they should always be the teacher, not make a record for somebody else. So to circumvent that, I'm going to close out of here, and I'm going to go to that data card value, and within here you have different display modes that you can choose. So in the data card value, if I come on up to its display mode, we have 3 different ones. By default, it says parent.display mode. So what that's doing is saying whatever the column defaults are for this data source, I'm going to use its display mode. So this is an editable column, which is why it's editable inside of the form. However, I could change it to display mode.view. And so if I change it to display mode.view and I hit play, notice now my users cannot come in here and type anything in. All right. Now some users might go, Matt, your app isn't working. I can't change values in here. So if you want to be really explicit with this, what you can do instead of display mode.view, you can change it to display mode.disabled. And now they see a grayed out version. So when they hit play, that's grayed out, so they know that they can't type anything in. So you have different options there. You can even hide the field from here. So if you're like, hey, I don't need them to know that I've logged their name, you could change the visibility from on to off. And now it's in the form, but your user doesn't even know it's being collected. But for validation purposes, I'm going to change mine back to display mode.view. All right, so instead of disabled, we'll go .view. Things are looking pretty good. Let's make a few more modifications. The next thing I want to do is default the check-in date and time to when the user is using the application. So I'm going to come up here to check-in date and time, and then I'm going to unlock this. So now that it's unlocked, I'm going to go into the date card value, which it currently says is parent.default, and I want it to be today's time. So I'm just going to put in a timestamp of today. Now notice when you use today, we're getting March 5th, because that's when I'm recording. It always gives a timestamp of midnight. So if you don't care about the timestamp, today is the way to go. If you do care about the timestamp, you would probably go with the function now. So for here, I can use either one that I want. But for the next two, I'm going to use the now function because I want to get the exact hour and the exact minutes. So I'm going to come over to the hour data card value. So these are all the items from 0 to 23 because it's on 24-hour time. But I'm going to go to the default selected items where it currently says it's currently taking the text it's taking the hour out of the parent.default, changing it to a text value, and doing it in the 2-digit representation that we need. Well, I want the hour to be pulled out of the current time. So instead of parent.default, I'm going to remove that and put in the now function. So I put in the now function, and now it's going to pull out the hour from the timestamp and then change it to the double-digit text that we need it to be formatted in. And so now over here, I can see 8. Perfect. Well, all we got to do is the same thing for the minutes. So I'm going to go to the minutes. I'm going to go to the default selected items one more time, and I'm going to remove that parent.default, and I'm going to replace it with now open close parentheses. So things are starting to look good. However, just some other things to note. Maybe for location, you don't like, that's currently the column name is called location, but maybe you want it to say something different on the form. You don't want your users to see the original column name because maybe it doesn't make sense, whatever the case might be. Well, to make those changes, those are called your data card keys. So if I go to my tree view underneath the location data card and I click on the data card key, I can change the text. But notice it's grayed out my formula window because my card is still locked. So let's unlock this card, but I'll do it a different way this time. I can do it in the tree view. So I'll hit location, the 3 dots, and I'll hit unlock. Now if I go back to the data card key, instead of using the original column name, which is parent.displayName, I could say something like room number. And now we see room number here. And again, we have a drop down because this is a lookup to our room table. So for right now, this is going to be our basic form. So things are looking good, but how do we actually create the record, and how can we have a user stop creating the record if they made a mistake, right? So typically on a form, you're going to have 2 buttons. You're going to have like a cancel button and a button to create the record. So let's put both of these buttons in. And like I said, in our next video, we're going to talk about a few of the more advanced things we can do with this form. But let's make sure we get it working to start with. So the first button I'm going to put in is the cancel button. So up here at the top, I'm going to go to Insert. And again, this does not have to be on the form. So let me make sure I make that clear. You can put your button anywhere you want to. So I currently just have the screen selected. I'm going to go Button. I'm going to bring this down over here, make it a little bit bigger so we can see. I'm going to change the text of the button to Cancel. Maybe I'll bump the font up to like a 14. And then I'm going to change this background color. Instead of that purple color, I'm going to go with the red. All right, so that's my cancel button. And to keep things easy to understand, I'm going to rename this button to BTN Cancel. So there's my cancel button. I'm going to want a save button, and let's say I want it the exact same design. So instead of putting a brand new button in, I'm just going to select the button, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. I'm going to relabel this button to BTN Save. And then I'm just going to change the text. Something like save. And maybe a different color. For this one, let me use my var accent color. So I'm going to come over to the fill, and I'm going to change this to one of our other variables, our var accent. All right, you design it how you want. Now the important pieces. What do these buttons need to do? So for a cancel button, what needs to happen is whatever the user was currently typing in, we want all of that to get removed. We want to reset the form, get rid of user changes. So on your cancel button, with it selected, we go to its onSelect property, and then we're going to change it from false, which means nothing is happening, and we're going to say take the form, and we want to reset the form, and we want to reset it in what's currently called Form 1. And technically, that's normally all you need, but just so you know, if you're ever going to use this form to both create records and edit records, you're going to want to add this next line in, and this next line can never hurt your application. It'll never cause problems. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't, but if you put it in, it will never break. And we'll explain what this does once we get into editing records later in our series. But we're also going to say put the form back into new mode. So reset all the changes and then put the form back into new mode. So let's see if that in fact works. So I'm going to come over here. I've got Jack I'm going to choose some random stuff here. And again, we could have changed the default modes of these display modes to where the users can't change it. I'm going to say room 43, put in some random comments. If I hit cancel, yay, everything is good. The only thing that stayed were all the default values that I put into the form itself. But everything else that I put in, which was the room number and the comments, have now been removed. All right, that is your cancel button. Easy peasy. Now the save button, not too difficult either. So with our save button selected, we're going to go to its onSelect property. And what we want to have happen is all the data that is currently inside of this form, let's submit it back to our data source. So the function that does that is called submit form and then the name of your form. That's it, but we're not done. But that will definitely create the record. But if we left it like that, the application's not going to work. Because we now have to say, well, what needs to occur after I create the record? I'm a teacher. I just made a record. Another student comes in. I need to make another record. So I need the form to go back into new mode after the record was created. But I don't put that next line of code on the button itself because I only want the form to go back into new mode if the record was successfully created. If there was a network issue or something, in the universe that made the record not get created, I don't want the form to go back into new mode because now my teacher has to put in all the information over again. So to circumvent that, we're going to say only put this form back into new mode if the record did get successfully created. So where we put this line of code is not on the button, but we go to the form itself. And on the form, there's a property called onSuccess, which says, hey, anytime the form is successfully submitted, what do you want me to do? Well, what do I want it to do? I want the form to go back into new mode. So new form, form 1, and at this point, technically we are done. We don't have to do anything else, but let's just say this is the way the app is going to look. How is my teacher going to know that the record did get successfully created? Because in my application right now, later it will change, but right now they can't see the check-in records. So let's give them a nice little text message in the app to let them know that the record was created. And this text message should only show up if the record was successful, which is why I'm putting it here on the onSuccess property. So what I'm going to add in here is a notify function. So notify, we then do a double quote, and we can say something like a new check-in was created for. We'll just go with the new check-in was created. We'll keep it simple. We'll modify this down the road to where we actually get some information from that gallery. So a new check-in, let's do it now. A new check-in was created for ampersand. Let's look at our gal browse students dot selected dot first name. So we'll say a new check-in was created for 4. Let's put in their last name as well. So I'm going to do another ampersand. Get a hard-coded space so their first and last names have a space between them. And then I'll do the same thing here. Let me zoom out. I'm going to go gal browse students dot selected dot last name. All right, so now I have in all the text that I want. So I'm going to go comma. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. And I'm going to go down to my next line. So now I've chosen the text. Now what kind of notification type do I want it to see? So the notification type that I choose, you have 3 of them. So the one that I want is notification type dot success. That shows in a green banner. If I chose information, it shows in gray. Error shows in a red banner. And the warning is in orangish yellowish color. So I'm going to go dot success. And then I'm going to close this out. So now let's see if we are in business. So this should only go into new form if the record was successful, and then we should get that notification. So I'm going to hit play here. We know our cancel button works. So I'm going to come on up here to 4, and we'll choose, room number 26, and we'll say getting math help. So when I hit save here, bingo, a new check-in was created for Terry. We can see it up here in the upper left-hand corner. We see that the form has now gotten back into new mode. So now if I come on over here to Layla and I say Layla's gone into 43 and volunteering to clean up room during her lunch, whatever, if I hit save, now another record has been created. A new check-in was created. If I close out a preview to make sure I think it's working, but you really want to make sure, you can always, because we're in Teams and we're using Dataverse here, we can always come on over here to data. we could go to our student check-ins and outs table and we could click edit data, and we should see 2 records in here. And as you can see, there's that auto numbering that was handled there for us. And we got the location, the comments, so everything is working picture perfect. So this is your basic intro into forms where we made a few modifications. There's a lot more that we can do with it, and that's going to come in either the next episode or the second one later. I'm not sure what we're going to do next. We might get into galleries, or we might show successful form completion of, hey, here's the record you just created, here's the details, do you want to edit them? There's a lot of ways we can move forward with this, but hopefully you've been enjoying the series. If that's the case, make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one.